afternoon. On behalf of the Association for the Study of Persianate Societies, I am delighted to welcome you to the 7th biennial conference of the association in the beautiful city of Istanbul. My name is Parvaneh Pourshariati. I am the past president of the association, and I see many, many new and many old faces in the, old friends, not old faces, in the association, in the, sorry, a little bit jet lag here. Anyway, we have an exciting program that has been organized for us under the leadership of Professor Joanne Gross, my good friend and colleague, together with the organizing committee. And I have, at the insistence of Professor Saïd Arjomand, I came to be the MC tonight. So I'm very happy to perform my role as the MC. Before I begin, I would like to say just a few words about the association. Most of you have been members of the association for a long time, and it is a function of your contribution to the association and your real loyalty, so to speak, to the association, which is a very unique association, as all of you acknowledge. It is as a result of your contributions that the association has been thriving, and it will be celebrating pretty soon its 20th birthday, very appropriately, under the leadership of its founder, 3 times president, with now 3 times president, Professor Saïd Amir Arjomand. I'm sure you all know Professor Arjomand, and the fact that he has no introduction. He's one of the foremost sociologists in the association, and considering his role in the association, you would think that Saïd owns the association. That's not the case, I assure you. Yeah, there are others of us who have been very much involved in association, as you very well know. One of us who is here and is going to be speaking, Professor Joanne Gross, was with the association since its foundation, almost in a couple of years, 20 years ago, an active member. And besides that, we have the board of directors, without whose contribution really the association cannot continue its important role. At any rate, there are a number of changes to the program that I would like to announce before I forget. First and foremost is that for this evening is that we will have immediately after with a few minutes to rearrange the setup here for us. We will immediately after Professor Arjomand's speech, inaugural speech, we will have the music performance, which has been organized for us. And as you know, it's a really unique opportunity for us because our artists, and we will have Professor Biennial talk about it more, but it is a unique opportunity because the group that has been invited to perform for us will be performing medieval Persianate music, or what we think is medieval Persianate music in the Ottoman domains. So it is a very unique opportunity. After that, we will have a reception, which I also hope you will join in the terrace overlooking the beautiful Bosphorus. So that is one of the changes in the program. And another change, and once I get to the acknowledgements and our gratitude to various sort of supporters and collaborators, before I get into that, I would like to announce again, before I forget, that unfortunately Professor Zeki Alpan, the Vice-Rector of the Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University, will not be able to join us, and instead of him we are delighted to have Professor Sitareh Turan Bakir, a faculty of fine arts in the Department of Traditional Turkish Department. She will very graciously perform the role of welcoming us. We now have three new offices established. In the Persianate domains, we're going to be having a new office in Japan at the University of Tokyo. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of the circumstances of that. Saïd will inform us more about that. With the help of Professor Carlo Ceretti, I know that we are going to have another branch at the University of Rome in Italy. And finally, I mean, this is really, really delightful in terms of the expanse that we are witnessing and the directions that we are going. It is really, really delightful. That for me, and I'm sure for most of you, because we're going to go to these places also, yeah. So the third one is in Moscow at the State University of Humanities. Okay, so I will leave the introductory parts to this, and I think I've taken care of the changes to the program, yes? So without any more delay, I would like to thank sincerely, because I've been involved in the organizations of the conferences before, and I know what it means to have a host and a collaborator. So I would like to give our sincere gratitude to the Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University. I will just underline a few of our colleagues, and I'm sure that much more have had a hand in organizing this event for us here at the university. Professor Zeki Alpan, the Vice-Rector, Professor Mahmoud Bozkurt, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Professor Sitareh Turan Bakir, Faculty of Arts, Professor Özlem Ataman, the Rectorate Coordinator, and finally, Professor Asli Gürbüz Satirolu, Rectorate Coordinator. Thank you all for your hospitality. I would like to also thank the Orient-Institut of Istanbul, especially Professor Raul Matika, the director, and Dr. Richard Wittmann. Is Dr. Wittmann here? Okay, Dr. Richard Wittmann, the associate director. Thank you so much once again for your hospitality and collaboration. So I think I have covered everything, yes? Okay, so without any further ado, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your support. And I give the podium to Professor Sitareh Turan Bakir for the welcoming address. Professor Bakir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Dear guests, yes, this is Sitareh Turan Bakir. I'm the head of the Tile and Ceramics program in the Department of Turkish Traditional Art of Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University. Herewith, I would like to emphasize the importance of our department in relation to the Turkish-Iranian cultural ties. It's probably one of the few schools where research in this area is carried out, both in theory and practice, combining both approaches with each other, on which also my teaching is based. Especially in the areas of tile production, calligraphy, illumination, bookbinding, carpets, kilns, and all textiles, we see the importance of cross-cultural studies. In the absence of our Vice-Rector, Professor Zeki Alpan, who is traveling on an international business and is wishing us a successful conference, I took over the welcoming address. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to the President, Saïd Amir Arjomand, Vice-President Joanne Gross, and all other distinguished members of the Association for the Study of Persianate Societies, and especially to Judith Pfeiffer from University of Oxford, who made the whole process both professional and enjoyable. Before I finish this short introductory speech, I would like to point out that I grew up in this transcultural environment, having a Persian mother and a Turkish father. Therefore, I am so happy for me personally and for my university professionally to be part of being this important event. So I welcome you once more and wish us all a successful and productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Satara Hanım. I would like now to ask Professor Wittmann, Richard Wittmann, to please join us from the Orient-Institut. Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear members of ASPS, dear ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the German Orient-Institut Istanbul, it is with great pleasure that I would like to welcome you to Istanbul and to this year's ASPS Biennial Convention. For the Orient-Institut Istanbul, which is a German humanities research institute abroad of the Max Weber Foundation, the collaboration with the ASPS and the conference organizers provides a wonderful opportunity to venture out and extend our geographic focus of research to include the Persian-speaking world. As some of you may know, the Orient-Institut, Istanbul's mother institute in Beirut, was originally founded in 1961 by the German Oriental Society, the Deutsche Morgenländische Gesellschaft, to foster academic research in Germany and Central Europe with regard to the Arabic-speaking world, with a special focus on Greater Syria and Egypt. Generations of scholars from Central Europe and beyond have spent a period of several months or years at the Orient-Institut in Beirut to study the Near East in situ and to make use of the rich archives of the region and to establish various forms of academic cooperation with their colleagues from the Near East. When, during the Lebanese civil war, it became too dangerous for many of our German colleagues to stay in Lebanon, a small branch office was opened here in Istanbul in 1987, where research on the Near East and the Arab Peninsula could be conducted safely. It soon became clear, however, that Istanbul not only offers great working conditions for scholars of the Arab world, with its rich manuscript collections such as the Süleymaniye Library, but this is true even more so for the study of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, and the Turkic-speaking world at large. In 2009, the Orient-Institut Istanbul was founded as an independent research institute with a new research mandate, the study of the Turkish-speaking world under the umbrella of the Max Weber Foundation. This foundation, which is funded by the Federal Ministry of Research of Germany, operates research centers in some 10 countries around the globe, a setup which is highly conducive to carrying out regional studies in the humanities in a comparative perspective. While there are centers in India, Lebanon, Egypt, and Turkey, among others, thus far research on the culturally rich Persian-speaking world in between these countries is still in its infancy within our foundation. Having said that, the new political situation in the relations between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the West creates new opportunities and hopes for closing this deplorable void and to further the study of Iran and Persianate societies. For us, the cooperation with ASPS is a most welcome opportunity to explore ways in which we can add this fascinating world culture to the research areas of our foundation, and I'm much looking forward to hear about the fascinating research that will be presented at this conference. Once more, I would like to welcome everybody and I wish us all exciting days here in Istanbul with fruitful academic exchanges and new insights. Thank you very much.
Professor Sitare Turan Bakir of Mimar Sinan University, Associate Director Richard Wittmann of Orient-Institut Istanbul, distinguished colleagues and guests, it is really, truly wonderful to see all of you here in the beautiful city of Istanbul. Welcome. As the chair of the conference organizing committee, I'd first like to express my gratitude to Professor Zeki Alpan, who was not able to be with us this evening, and to Professor Raul Mutika, and to Dr. Richard Wittmann of the Orient-Institut Istanbul for their collaboration and for their support of this conference. As the organizing committee chair, and I have been involved in every biennial conference since our beginning. In fact, our first conference, I'm very proud to say, because I work in Tajikistan, in Central Asia, actually was in Dushanbe. And I know the work that goes into it, both from the side of ASPS and from the side of our collaborators and our supporters in the countries in which we hold these conferences. So I would like to acknowledge the members, all the members of the organizing committee who worked so hard to prepare the conference during this past year. They're all listed in your program. I'm not going to name everyone, but I would like to, in particular, acknowledge Pouria Ali Moradi, Ghazal Daberi, and Sarah Nur Yildiz. For the past 8 months, Dr. Yildiz has worked tirelessly here in Istanbul in order to make this conference as successful as possible. Without her, this conference would not have materialized, and so I would like to acknowledge her work and her support. I would also like to thank Professor Sitare Turan Bakir and Özlem Ataman, who is the rectorate coordinator, and Asli Gurboz Shatiroglu, rector coordinator at Mimar Sinan University, as well as, by the way, the many students you will see around Mimar Sinan who is going to be working to help you with directions and providing water to the panelists and so on. Finally, we should acknowledge Judith Pfeiffer's role because she chose and arranged our venue here at the beautiful Mimar Sinan University, and also to Dr. Evrim Binbaş, who has organized what I am sure is going to be a very memorable concert following the inaugural address. So I would like to just take a few moments, because in addition to wearing the hat of Vice President and also being the chair of the organizing committee, so this should give you some hint of the fact that I am extremely devoted to this organization. And there's a reason, because our organization, as Dr. Pourshariati has said, is really unique. I am a scholar who works in Central Asia. I have worked in Central Asia since 1979. I've seen history in the making. It's still happening. I am an early modern specialist who is recently doing some more modern work with early modern connections. And so one of the parts, the other hat that I wear, is the director of CERF, the Central Eurasia Research Fund. And you may not know about CERF unless you've surfed the net and actually seen our website. There is a link to the Central Eurasia Research Fund. I founded and I direct the Central Eurasian Research Fund. In 1996, when I became involved in ASPS in the very early stages of our development, at the invitation of our president and founder, Professor Saïd Arjomand, because of my interest in Central Asia, I wanted to find a way to not only include those scholars from Central Asia who are doing work and eager to interact with other scholars from the broader Persianate world, but also to find a way to support scholarship in these regions, and in particular to support the publications that could not be published without some kind of financial support. CERF offers competitive annual fellowships to support the publication of books by scholars in Central Asia, or to support the purchase of equipment necessary for substantial scholarly projects. To date, CERF grants have resulted in the publication of 29 books that range from Persian poetry to medieval irrigation techniques to labor migration to Ismaili religious practices. And I should add that CERF is run entirely from private donations, not from membership dues. In addition to our publications that we have supported, CERF also provides support to sponsor workshops, local publications, travel funds for the scholars from the Caucasus and from Central Asia to attend our biennial conferences. So I am really delighted to welcome our scholars from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Armenia, Georgia, and Afghanistan. Best wishes to all of you for a very enjoyable and productive conference, and I look forward to attending the panels and meeting with you throughout the conference. Thank you.
Okay, there is going to be a fantastic news for all of us, and I think we're going to leave that to the founder and the current president of the association, Professor Saïd Amir Arjomand, to announce it. I can give you a hint. Should I give you a hint? No? Okay, please welcome Saïd.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do have quite a bit of good news this time, as you've already heard most of them on the new openings. I think that will in Russia, Japan, and Italy, the Mediterranean office, and in fact, Japan will cover all of, I think, East Asia and Russia. I think Parvaneh kindly acknowledged Dr. Cereti, who's here, and Dr. Ivanov is not here, unfortunately, but I'd like to acknowledge my good friend and colleague, Professor Kazuo Morimoto at the University of Tokyo, who will be editing our thing. And then, before I bore you with my own lecture, the other good news is that we are going to have the next biennial convention in March of 2017, Esfand of 1369, in Shiraz. Mr. Tourosh Kamali is here. He will be the organizing committee chair. And I hope we'll see all of you there. This is a beautiful season for Shiraz, and in springtime, the weather should be perfect, and you can come to the conference and then celebrate Nowruz afterwards. With these good news, I'm afraid from now on it's downhill, and I'm afraid I'm sure if it wasn't for staying on to listen to the fantastic music of Persianate music, Timurid music in Ottoman Istanbul, you'd all leave now. But I have a captive audience, so I'd like to talk about the unity of the Persianate world under the Turko-Mongolian domination, and then the divergent patterns of imperial autocracy from 16th century onwards. That is, when the Safavids and the Ottomans, which shared an awful lot until then, began to move in different directions in the 16th century. Now, but let me go back to the revival of Persian language in the early 10th century by the Samanids, which laid the foundation for the emergence of the Persianate worlds, whose ecumenical unity, in fact, had two important components: Persianate Islam and Persian kingship. The most significant works in the nascent Persian prose were the Persian creed of the leading Hanafi theologian Maturidi and another Hanafi creed in Persian. Those are very early works, and especially, of course, the great commentary, Tafsir Bozorg, which is wrongly attributed to Tabari. But then, of course, so that is on the Islam side. On the kingship side, of course, you have the famous history, Tabari's great history of the prophets and kings, Tarikh al-Rusul wal-Muluk, which was translated by Bal'ami in this period, and it laid the foundation for various earlier prose Shahnames and finally the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi. Now, thus, from the very beginning, the Persianate variant of Islamic civilization combined the Persianization of Islam with the revival of Persian kingship. Then, with the exposition of mystical concepts in elegant prose of Haji Abdullah Ansari, 11th century, mid-11th, and especially writings of his followers, the followers of Pir Tariqat in the 12th century, Sufism too was incorporated into Persianate Islam and in fact became its distinctive feature. The Persian idea of kingship, as it spread throughout Iran, was very much an ideal. Anachronistically speaking, we have a Max Weber's foundation support. He would have said it's an ideal type. An ideal type that didn't really correspond very well to reality of the Turko-Mongolian monarchy. In fact, the fit was very poor. You could say there was complete lack of fit. The Persianate model and the ethos of kingship, which then later on Nizam al-Mulk, in fact, sought to foster in Siyar al-Muluk, had little to do with the actuality of itinerant kingship of the great Seljuks, who resided and gave audiences in their pavilions, kushk, in the military camps, Lashkargah, always outside of the cities. Never had palaces in Isfahan or anywhere else. Now, just as the main line of the Seljuks in Iran and Iraq was about to be terminated, in Anatolia, close to here, a little further east, you have Sultan Kılıç Arslan, the ruler of the Seljuk Principality, who gave all his sons names of the old Persian kings of Shahnameh, Keyqobad, Keykhosro, and Keykavus. So, and they also commissioned several Seljuk names, which were modeled on Ferdowsi's, on the Shahnameh, as well as Shahnames in Persian. Of course, everything was written in Persian, of course. The Seljuk names was modeled on Shahnameh, and giving the history of the Seljuk dynasty kind of added on to the history of the kings. And as we shall see, the Ilkhanids were to do the same thing with Hamdullah Mustafi and give a commission of their own Zafarnameh, which was their Shahnameh, but in fact included all the descendants of Chengiz Khans as the important dynasties in the world. In fact, he gave more pages to descendants of Chengiz Khan than to the what we call the Arab kings, who were the caliphs, and the Persian kings, who were the ancient Iranian king. Now, so the Persianate kingship, of course, lost a very serious conceptual rival with the destruction of the caliphate by the Mongols. And already the first Ilkhans who came after that, in fact, decorated the palaces of the Sasanian coronation site in Takht-e-Suleiman with verses of Shahnameh on tiles. And the later Ilkhans, as is very well known, of course, promoted the production of the lavishly illustrated manuscripts of Shahnameh and commissioned, as I said, Hamdullah Mustafi to write their own epic of kings, Zafarnameh. Now, on the basis of Tabari's pairing of prophets and kings, Rusul al-Muluk, the great 11th century historian Bayhaqi developed a theory of the two divinely ordained powers, Tughovat, of prophethood and monarchy. Mustafi gives this theory a further Persianate twist by linking it inseparably, linking kingship inseparably to the land of Iran, Iran Zamin. Now, faithfully to the Persian tradition of Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, he made the king's divine charisma transitive and spread over the realm of Iran. Thus, the good news came, he said, from that the good news came from the heaven to earth, that the earth of the land of Iran, Iran Zamin, shall be sent a king by God. That was, I guess, Olja II, Sultan Muhammad. Now, the Ilkhans, no doubt, found it convenient to convert their subordinate, and I think that's, of course, we know that the Persian bureaucrats were the promoters of the idea of kingship for state building, but Ilkhans, no doubt, found it very convenient to convert their nomadic ulus ölegu, that is one of the branches of the four ulus of the Mongol Empire, into the territorial and God-protected Mahruse, Mamalik Mahruse, a realm of Iran Zamin. However inconsistent their adherence to the norms of Persianate kingship, and however ambivalent the conversion of the later Ilkhans to Islam, they were nevertheless paradoxically instrumental in the expansion of Darul Islam to Anatolia and to the intensive Islamicization of Anatolia. Persianate Sufism came very quickly as the Mongols invaded Khorasan and Transoxania. The Sufis keep moving into Anatolia. Konya, the capital of the Seljuks of Rome, was a great and receiving, receptive under Alauddin Keykubat, who highlights of it, but it continued later after him. And immediately from 1220s on, first the Turkmens who were displaced from Kharazm come all the way from Central Asia into Anatolia. Sufis run after them. Najmuddin Razi Daye comes right away in 1220. It goes into, and is introduced by Sheikh Omar Sohrawardi, the Persian advisor of the Caliph and Nasr al-Din Allah, with whom I hope I will have a minute to mention very briefly. The Sufis come together with the Turkmen right away. And in fact, hand in hand, the dervishes come, the Qalandars come from Khorasan very quickly, and they're very important for the Islamicization of Anatolia as it was expanding and pushing the Byzantines further and further west. Now, the Khwarezmian Turks, for instance, in fact, were probably behind a very early rebellion of a certain Baba Ishaq, who called himself Baba Rasulullah, or his followers called him Baba Rasulullah, who, in fact, right around Konya, and he proclaimed himself the Keman Sultan Rumam, a Moridan. So Moridan are the Turkmens who were first converted. As we shall see, in fact, this is just what the Safavis will do later. So he was called most probably by his detractors the beggar sultan, Sultan Jomri or Jemri, or Jamri, whatever, you don't know what. But the Konya partitions, in fact, including Maulana's son, Sultan Walad, got together with the Akhis, the associations of the Sufi tinged associations of Fotovat, and they defended the city, got rid of this Sultan Cemri, and in fact, the tumult horrified Sultan Valad, a leading patrician of Konya, who had close ties not only with the Akhis of his city, but also with the chief Akhi of Sivas, Akhi Muhammad Divaneh. He's a very famous guy with a char zarb, meaning he would shave everything. But he was a leading Akhi, certainly coming from the Qalandar background. Now, Sufism had already penetrated grassroots urban civic associations in the 11th century and 12th centuries, and the late Abbasid Caliph al-Nasir al-Din Allah, as I mentioned, sought to exploit it by unifying all these associations under a purified futawwa, unifying them with Sufi orders, mainly order of Sheikh Omar Sohrawardi, his main advisor, Persian advisor, and he declared himself the supreme head, Qutb Qible, of all the Akhi organizations who were also introduced to Sufism. Now, this was followed by the devotional cult of Ali and the Shiitization of Sufism from below among the antinomian dervishes, dervish groups. And by the early 14th century, as is well known, Ibn Battuta, in fact, was entertained by Al-Akhiyat al-Fetyan in Anatolia, and then reports similar activities in central Iran by the Akhi Fotovat organizations. Now, the Sufi penetrated Akhi guilds, in fact, guilds cum youth organizations, in fact, effectively enjoyed self-government in Ankara, in alliance with the local patricians and emirs since 1290. Anatolia was annexed in 1277 officially, although earlier on it had become a vassal state. 1277 was annexed into the Ilkhanid Empire. But Ilkhanid Empire, they had their capital in Sivas. In Ankara, they're fairly self-governing, and self-government consisted really of these akhis in participation, in cooperation with the emirs, as I said, and local patricians. So as the Ilkhanid Empire disintegrated, they established a de facto Akhi republic under the Akhi Muazzam, Sharaf ad-Din, until in the 14th century, until they handed Ankara over to Murad I in 1361. Murad's father, Orhan, had built a convent for dervishes in Bursa earlier, and in fact the Akhis continued to enjoy Ottoman support and favor, and one, Akhi Yaqub, built in fact a mosque in Ankara in 1391, while Haji Bayram Vali established the Sufi order and the so-called Akhi Babas, who were descendants of the Haji Bektash's friend, Akhi Evran, in fact, continued to act as representatives of Ottoman guilds for centuries after that. Now, much better documented than the Ankara Akhi Republic is the history of the so-called Sarbedar Republic, which emerged in Sabzavar in Khorasan after the disintegration of the Ilkhanid Empire. The Akhi Fotovat artisans of Sabzavar, in fact, participated in government with patricians and local emirs, briefly becoming the actual rulers of the city from 1346 to 1362. The local emirs, in fact, twice co-opted as partners in government the sheikhs of these local Sufi orders, especially one order who had been recruiting people for the army of the Mahdi in Khorasan before. But each time, of course, they turned them in and they let them remain in power, but as soon as they could, of course, they killed them, they got rid of them. The Sufis came back, of course, not the same dervish, but another dervish came into power briefly between 1377 and 1379. Once again, the emirs got better of him and got rid of him, and then Amir Muayyad basically became a king, as is referred to, of Sabzawar. Now, Timur, finally, we're inching toward the present and toward the divergence of the paths. Now, Timur, of course, conquered Sabzawar in 1381, and then he defeated Yildirim Bayezid I in the Battle of Ankara in 1402. Now, Timur had become the Khan of the Ulus Chagatai, one of Cengiz's second son or third son, and the tribal polity of Cengiz Khan's second son, that's correct, was under him. His ascent was very slow, and in it, he in fact changed the tribal leaders from allies to subjects and transformed the Ulus from a tribal coalition into an army of conquest. The Turko-Mongolian empires had built-in endemic instability due to the unchanged rules of nomadic patrimonialism. These rules were for the division of conquered land and people among the conqueror's sons, which inevitably resulted in wars of succession. Wars of succession tended to be very bloody. Joseph Fletcher, in fact, called this contentious succession struggle tanistry. After the establishment of Timur's empire, his tribal armies gradually lost their importance, and locally recruited troops replaced them and were put under Timur's sons, and especially under his nokers, companions, rather than other tribal leaders. Now, with his death in 1405, in fact, Timur's empire disintegrated as the nominal puppet descendant of Cengiz Khan that he'd insisted calling the Shah Padshah Islam, King of Islam, to be faithful both to Cengiz and Islam. But in fact, he was certainly no antidote to the succession rules of nomadic pastoralism and the bloody succession wars that followed, the tanistry. Now, the disintegration of Timur's empire into a growing number of Timurid principalities, in fact, ruled by his sons and grandsons, allowed the remarkable rebound, incidentally, of the Ottomans, who came right back after a few years, 10 years or so after their defeat, and began this westward conquest of Byzantium that you all know about. And besides them, of course, something similar happened because of this integration of the Timurid Empire. Other nomadic pastoralist empire arose, the Akkoyunlu in western Iran and eastern Anatolia, Karakoyunlu in Iraq and southern Anatolia, and so forth. Now, meanwhile, while all this was going on, the ideal that had, in fact, Persian, of course, remained the official language of the Turko-Mongolian empires, and the Persianate ideal of kingship prevailed. Now, it prevailed, as I said, in the Seljuks, who were itinerant kings. The Ilkhans were certainly itinerant kings. Instead of kushk, they called their big palatial tent khargah. They always received people in the tents. Nevertheless, I think the ideal of Persian kingship prevailed. However, that ideal had undergone considerable change under the paradoxical impact of Sufi world renunciation. Najmuddin Razi, who was introduced, as I said, to the Alauddin Kayqubad, the Seljuk, by Sohrawardi, in fact, offered Kayqubad, Alauddin, his magisterial treatise, Mersad al-Ibad min من المبدأ إلى المعاد. And the path of God's bondsman, Algar's translation, From Origin to Return. Now, the novelty of Najm ad-Din's approach reflected the impact of the world renunciation, Tark Dunya, on the conception of kingship, which consisted in treating the king, the novelty consisted in treating the king as a real Sufi disciple, speaking of the wayfaring or suluk of the kings. Now, different classes of society performed their functions, specialized functions, to assure the cultivation of the seeds of spirituality and knowledge, according to Razi. And finally, a just and politic king, Padshah, is needed to maintain the equilibrium among the people and to repel the evil and prevent the oppression of the weak by the strong, and to preserve and protect the path of subjects. To tell you in short, of course, all of this sounds very familiar. King has justice is the big principle of kingship, but here he says this justice is there, but it's a subsidiary thing. Suluk Padshahan is the main thing. They have to do it, and of course, justice is a component of it. So then, of course, with this, as I said, everything comes in. He has the famous verse 32:28, thou givest kingship to whom thou wilt. God telling David in connection with David, and in fact backs it up with this hadith, the king is the shadow of God upon earth, in whom the oppressed take refuge. And these together are taken to establish that monarchy or sultanate is the deputyship of khilafat and vicegerency of God Almighty. He then introduced a Sufi note of intemperance, of temporal power. The king should know that, and I quote Razi, that God took kingship away, and he should know that God took the kingship that he's enjoying now and gave it to another person, because the follow-up to the Quranic verse is, and thou seizes back the kingship from whom thou wilt. So God gives the kingdom, and God takes it back if you're not good. So Razi says that God, in fact, took kingship from another to give it to you or to him, and that one day it will be taken away from him to give to another. Thou takest kingship from whom thou wishes. He therefore strives, he will therefore strive, the king should therefore strive, I would say, to attain true and abiding kingship by means of this borrowed and transitory kingship. This kingship is ariye, borrowed, transitory, passing. It will go, someone else will take it over. Now, this negative dismissal of earthly kingship that was required by world renunciation norm of Sufism is echoed a century and a half later by the Sufi man of letters Ahmadi, who in fact appended the history of the early Ottomans to his Iskandar-Name. And Ahmadi says the following: the world is no place to be valued, its faithlessness is no hiding thing. All those who've been caliph had died by another's sword. The sultanate is transitory. Taking pride in it is the work of Satan. Don't be proud that you have power as you're a sultan. This is what he writes for the early Ottomans. Now, in 1258, the very faithful year of overthrow of the Abbasid Caliphate by Ulegu, in fact, Saadi wrote Golestan, whose first chapter is on the tradition and manner of kings, Sirat Padshahan. But what's more interesting than that, this Sirat Padshahan as wielders of earthly power. And then it's followed by a second chapter on Akhlaq Darvishan. This is very significant, I think, the ethics of the dervishes. So as the religious elite and wielders of spiritual power, so they replace the ulama officially. From Saadi on, you have Darvishan. Najmuddin Razi tries to mix them together, but with Saadi it's Darvishan and the ulama. There's one faqih somewhere in some footnote, but that's it in the Khorasan. You don't find it. Everyone who's important is a dervish, people who stand up to the king and say that this kingship is worthless, illusory. They're all dervishes. People who say that the flock is not for the shepherd, but the shepherd for the flock. All these things are very democratic things that you find. They're all said by these dervishes to the kings. And he's very modest in praise of his king, his royal patron. So I think I mentioned this because this ordering is remarkable, because it shows that the Sufi virtuoso as dervishes have replaced the jurists as the religious elite in Persianate societies. Now, the challenge to royal authority by both dervishes and these urban akhi confraternities, Futawat confraternities, was evident in the ceremonial crowns, the taj that these akhis wore, the Futawat people wore, as well as the assumption of the title of Shah and Amir by the leaders of these people. The one person I mentioned, the Akhi Ahmed of Konya, for instance, certainly called Shah Ahmed, as well as Akhi Ahmed. And the nemesis of upward mobility of the Sufi masters into the ranks of spiritual elite, in fact, of the post-Mongol world, the nemesis was the tremendous growth of Shiitized Sufism of antinomian dervish groups, or what our colleague Kara Mustafa calls God's unruly friends. The Qalandars, the Haidaris, the Malamatis, and the Abdal of Rum professed their ecstatic love of Ali as the king of men, Shah Mardan, and they turned a Sufi world renunciation into a rejection of society, or in Kara Mustafa's words, in fact, renunciation of society through outrageous social practices, outrageous social deviance. In other words, shaving your beard, eyebrows, wearing kind of heavy things, going around naked, and so forth. Now, the highly changeable and decentralized successor Turko-Mongolian nomadic states, that is the Akkoyunlu, Qaraguyunlu, and the Timurids, in fact, offered these Sufi sheikhs very great opportunity for oppositional mobilization, and induced many of them to draw on Shiite and esoteric Kabbalistic wisdom, and of course the Shiite millennial idea of the Mahdi. Now, this worldly political orientation transformed their world-rejecting outlook, giving popular Sufism a distinctly millennial inflection. We thus have a large number of Sufi movements which are emphatically millennial, beginning with this Sheikh Bedreddin in Anatolia, his famous revolt in 1416, and followed by the millennial movements of the Hurufi movement in Iran and Central Asia, the same of Nurbakhsh and Moshasha, all in the 15th century. Now, during the struggle of succession of Bayezid I, Sheikh Bedreddin Mahmud, who was a scion of the Seljuks of Rum, or so he claimed, was in fact, he joined by one of Bayezid's sons, Musa Chalabi. But in fact, Musa Chalabi appointed him Qazi Askar, the army judge, etc. But he was out of luck because Musa lost the war of succession to his brother Mehmed. So Sheikh Bedreddin gets exiled as a result of that. And during exile, actually, he established he went to Cairo, which was not very far, to Egypt. He was initiated to Sufism by a sheikh from Akhlat, of all places, Akhlati, who was a Hurufi, who was a member of the Hurufi Sufi group. And indeed, he kind of, later on, he picks up, and a very important detail that I haven't seen the Ottoman historians mention much, he goes up to the Safavids. Supposedly, he has a meeting with Timur, and Timur was supposed to have stopped in Ardabil to pay his respect to Sheikh Safi's son, and this Sheikh Bedreddin supposedly turns up there and has a meeting with the Safavids and come back. And that's very probable because we know that Safavids already, way in the beginning of the 15th century, they had their tekkes in where is it? Hamid, Eli, Tekke, Eli, and then places like that. And we know that Bedreddin, after Junayd, had a representative there. And we know a lot of them actually were, a lot of people who joined Qadi Bedreddin were actually followers of Junayd, because we have a record of his governor of Aleppo defeating them, and most of the people killed were actually Safavi followers. But anyway, then he was joined by the Bedreddin's missionaries, in fact, recruited many poor Sufis, badbacht Sufilar, and to whom, in fact, they reportedly preached communism of property, and they planned the uprising in 1416. According to an eyewitness report, Bedreddin thus proclaimed the uprising. From now on, government or beylik, or how you pronounced it then, and the throne is given to me. I am called Malik Mahdi, Malik Mahdi the king, and will unfurl the banner to rise. And he did. Didn't do too well. And just, it was put down, needless to say. But just around the time of Bedreddin's preparation for the uprising, we have an intriguing episode in early 15th century, which in fact proved to be the forerunner of a preemptive millennial inflection of sovereignty. The grandson of Timur, Mirza Iskandar, in fact, who was also an initiate into the Hurufi millennial movement and ruled Fars until 1414, as our colleague, Dr. Evrim Birnbash has shown, in fact, claimed to be the Mahdi of the end of time, who unified, this part is interesting, who unified the apparent and the real monarchy. Now, Sharafuddin Yazdi, who was a vizier of his successor, in fact, claimed for the divinely inspired ruler both the apparent and the spiritual caliphate, and the dual royal and religious princehood, Riyasatayn Mulki va Milli. Now, the final triumph of Sufism, and with it, the culmination of the paradoxical sacralization of temporal rule through world renunciation, came with the empire established by the young sheikh of the Safavid order, Shah Ismail, in 1500. The Safavid Mahdist revolution introduced a radical change in the conception of kingship. This was facilitated by the fact that popular Sufism, as I said, had already increasingly been tinged with Shiite expectation of the manifestation of the Mahdi. Ibrahim, in fact, the great-grandfather of who assumed the leadership of the Safavid order in 1427 already, really early, 1427, he began to call himself Sultan Ibrahim or Sheikh Shah. And so Junaid and Haydar, of course, have received a lot of attention, but in fact, even before them, this comes from popular Sufism, certainly being Shah or Sheikh Shah or Sultan Ibrahim, etc. But then Ismail's father and grandfather, the better known ones, Junaid and Haydar, in fact, sought what Mir Khan called the unification of dervishhood and kingship, Jam'i Darvishi o Shahi. Now, the material and the spiritual monarchy, in other words, this is the claim of the Safavids, which I think is completely new. Now, the popular Sufi conception of a unified material and spiritual monarchy was institutionalized under Shah Ismail. This conception of Ali, and of course, conception of Ali as Wali Allah, in fact, was a key to the fusion of the Sufi notion of velayat, friendship, with the juristic notion that you much later have as velayat, faqih, and so forth, together. And the Safavids certainly called themselves the dynasty of spiritual authority, Khandan velayat, throughout to the end of Khandan velayat va imamat. Now, the historian Mir Khan, in fact, Khandamir, who left the Safavid domains for India in the last years of his life, in fact, brought this fruit of the latest symbiosis of Sufism and kingship to the Timurid conqueror of India, Babur. But in fact, he got there a little too late, but he delivered it to his son Humayun anyway, around 1530. What Moin, in a very interesting new book, calls the millennial sovereignty was thus transplanted to Mughal India. But the Ottomans, too, were very much tempted by this spiritual legitimation and enhancement of autocracy, as indeed Gordon Fleischer shows, and millennial sovereignty was not definitely ruled out until the middle of the 16th century. Now, Idris Bidlisi, who was an official of the Haqqi Chancery in Tabriz, in fact, defected to the Ottomans after the revolution, Safavid revolution in 1501, and he was commissioned by Bayezid II to write a history of the dynasty, Ottoman dynasty in Persia. After Bayezid's death, Bidlisi then joined Sultan Selim in Chaldiran, and he was effectively made proconsul for Eastern Anatolia to kind of rule these unruly Turkmens with an iron fist for Selim. At the same time, of course, we know that there was a Turkish, he was the main Persian Monshi of Bayezid. Bayezid had a Turkish Monshi too, Kemal Paşazade, to whom he commissioned a writing of the Ottoman history in Turkish. And in fact, Kemal Paşazade also went to Chaldiran with Ismail and supposedly wrote fatwas declaring the killing of the Ghazalbash lawful because they were apostates. But unlike Bidlisi, as I said, who was a Sufi, Kemal Paşazade was in fact a jurist who wrote these fatwas. Now, Sultan Selim had not been shy in imitating Ismail's claim to be spiritual guide or murshid of his Ghazalbash tribes, and in fact he was proud to have been hailed as the Mahdi of the end of time, especially by his followers from afar from Central Asia. Now his son and successor, Sultan Suleiman Khan, wavered between the appropriation of the Mahdistic claims of Shah Ismail as well as the latter's claim to this important unification of spiritual and worldly sovereignty. He wavered between, Suleiman wavered between this idea of unification, which Bidlisi had in fact propounded in his in another book he had written for his father, Qanun-e-Shahanshahi. As a Sufi, he says that spiritual. As a Sufi, he says the following. Of course, the bulk of his so-called Qanun-e-Shahanshahi imperial law is a highly conventional mirror for princes, with a kind of a nodding to Islamic orthodoxy. Imperial monarchy, Shahanshahi, in fact, is synonymous with caliphate, khilafat for him, and the latter was conceived as God's deputyship, just like Najmuddin Razi. However, like our Timurid high official Yazdi, that is Sharafuddin Yazdi, Bedlisi also maintained the distinction between the apparent and real sovereignty, but only to unite them again in his royal patron. If, he says, and I quote, if formal caliphate and apparent sultanate, khilafat Suri wa saltanat Zahiri, if that is combined, if it's according to the prophetic Sharia and the rules of Khilafat Ma'navi, spiritual caliphate, then its embodiment is indeed God's deputy. Now, although Suleiman appointed Kemal Pashazadeh as Sheikh al-Islam in 1526, it was not until after the fall of and the secret execution of the powerful Wazir Ibrahim Pasha that, in fact, he opted for the championship of Sunni orthodoxy. In the following decade, of course, he appointed Kemal's student in jurisprudence, Abul Saud al-Imadi, also a Kurd, by the way, and Abul Saud, in fact, was the chief architect of the Ottoman judiciary organization, due to which his royal patron is styled Suleiman Qanuni, Suleiman the lawgiver. Now, to conclude then, the decisive event in the sundering the ecumenical unity of the Persianate world was not the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, but rather it was the Mahdist revolution of the Safavid Sheikh Shah Ismail half a century later. Both in the Ottoman and the Safavid empires, the disintegrative nomadic patrimonialism of the Timurid and Turko-Mongolian successor states were countered. All of this, those rules were a recipe for disintegration of empires. You just divide conquered land among your children, your main sons from the main wife, according to as your property. That's why I call it patrimonialism in the later expanded version of this. So, but the disintegrative effects of nomadic patrimonialism in all these Turko-Mongolian empires were in fact countered by variants of Persianate imperial monarchy. The parting of the ways, in fact, stemmed from the variant of autocracy that was adopted in the two cases, one Orthodox, Sunni, and the other heterodox with a heavy Sufi Shiite inflection. The latter model was, of course, the Safavid model, which spread to Mughal India. In fact, the descendants of Babur found that that was the solution to disintegration. Babur had divided his country, but with disastrous results. From then on, the Iranian, the Safavid Sufi variant, of course, was much more appealing to them, and that's what Moin's book is about, the millennial sovereign, how it was transported, this model of Persian kingship as a remedy to nomadic patrimonialism, in fact, and as a remedy to tanistry, was adopted by the Timurids of Mughal India. The Ottoman Empire, as I said, vacillated between the two models of spiritual autocracy, and it was only in the third century, only in the middle of the 16th century, as I said, that Suleiman decisively chose the Orthodox Sunni model. I could end here, but I'll keep you for one more second because I don't want to end on happy notes. It's not so easy to solve the problem of succession in nomadic Turko-Mongolian empires. The difficulty took at least another century or so in practice to solve. Tanistry was much harder to eradicate than nomadic patrimonialism. That is, Tanistry. Basically, what that said is that you have to prove that you're worthy of success. This is the only, by warfare. There's no other way that you can prove that you deserve. Whereas the nomadic division of the state is done automatically by the father. Nevertheless, tanistry was much harder to eradicate than nomadic patrimonialism, which was eradicated. Tanistry continued in both variants of imperial autocracy. Mehmed Fateh II, in fact, had to make successional fratricide a qanun. You had to kill your brothers. And still it was the Janissary who chose Bayezid over his favorite gem. And the struggle for succession to Bayezid, in fact, made the Ottoman Empire prey to the Qizilbash revolution, almost destroyed it, as you know, and let, in fact, the Qizilbash revolution try twice, basically. It had tried earlier, but in 511, it nearly succeeded because of the tanistry. And to prevent its repetition, then, one of his sons, Selim I, killed all his own sons, other than Suleiman, so that Suleiman could become his successor. And of course, Murad II, again, still killed 5 of his brothers before succeeding Selim II in 1574. I think we have to thank really the women here, the Walid Sultans with the eunuchs who took care of that problem from then on, and instead of men having killed each other, they would just handpick someone to become the Sultan. On the Iranian side, it was the same problem, in fact. In Iran, Shah Ismail's son Tahmasp, in fact, experienced the violence and horror of succession struggle as a child of 10, and wrote about it in his biography, as a pawn of various feuding Qizilbash factions, just as did his grandson Abbas the Abbas the Great, also from the age of 10 being a kind of virtual ruler. And Abbas indeed felt constrained to kill or bind his contending sons and grandsons to pave the way for the chosen grandson to succeed him, Safi, in 1629. In Iran, too, thanks to the Georgian and other Caucasian Walid Sultans, mothers of the Safavid kings. All of their mothers were Georgian, by the way, or Armenian. Thanks to them and their cooperation with the eunuchs, that problem was solved. Thank you very much.